For over 100,000 years they were earthbound, forged by titanic hands to shape the deepest places of the world, descendants of creatures birthed from the very rock and stone they hewed. By all accounts, the dwarves of the Wildhammer clan had no business looking skyward, and yet none would deny it. These wild dwarves are children of the skies, and the skies embrace them. Today, we tell the saga of perhaps the most iconic union Warcraft has ever forged. A union of dwarf and griffin, of beak and beard, wing and stormhammer. The Wildhammer Gryphon Rider. I'm not going to go over the full history of the Wildhammer clan. That juicy tale is for another video, so we'll skim over the bits we need. The Wildhammer clan was not always as we see it today. Back when the dwarves were united under Modimus Anvilmar, they inhabited the foothills and crags of the mountain, spending more time under the open skies than their cousins, producing the most resilient mountaineers of all the clans and becoming a folk hardy to the elements. When the War of the Three Hammers erupted, they would be defeated by the Bronzebeards and cast into exile. Defeated, the clan would venture northeast and eventually settle in the mountain ranges of the Highlands. And though they would found Grimbatol, a grand mountain fortress that would quickly grow to rival even that of Ironforge, it would not be their fate to be mountain dwellers. Their cousins, the Dark Iron clan, would carry out a two-pronged assault on both the Wildhammer home of Grimbatol and the Bronzebeard home of Ironforge. Before the gates of the mighty fortress had even been breached, the Dark Iron sorceress Modgud would use terrible shadow magic to curse the city, with the very shadows themselves assailing the Wildhammers in their own home. The clan would claim victory, but the curse had already claimed Grimbatol, and so the Wildhammers were once again without a home. And though the loss of Grimbatol was a tragedy, without it the Wildhammer clan may not have embraced a way of life that so wholly defines them today. While some of the clan would settle in the nearby region of Northuron, the majority of the clan would head even further north, to the wooded hinterlands. But the memories of the events of Grimbatol would still haunt them. The scars went too deep. And so, for the first time, the Wildhammer would not obey what was embedded in their very being. They did not dig deep into the mountains. They embraced the land around them and the unending skies above them. They would construct a majestic city high in the mountains like none the dwarves had ever built before, and they named it Eerie Peak. In their new home of the hinterlands, the Wildhammers would begin a cultural drift from their cousins. They would begin to study the nature around them, and they would begin to commune with a creature that would forever change the course of the history of their people, the majestic griffin. With the forequarters of an eagle and the hindquarters of a lion, griffins are highly intelligent, cunning and awfully powerful, naturally territorial and aggressive, with a wingspan of up to 9 meters or 30 feet and reaching over 2.5 meters or 9 feet long. They were rightly seen as terrifying creatures, generally thought to be avoided by other races, never mind tamed. But the Wildhammer saw something else. They did not seek to tame them, they sought to earn their trust. And over time, Dwarf and Griffin would forge a bond unlike any seen in Azeroth. Not one of master and beast, but companions, two equals. The dwarves of the Eyrie would learn to ride griffins, and the two would quickly become inseparable, with griffins becoming intertwined with the very culture of Wildhammer society itself. Wildhammer children began to be exposed to fledgling griffins, learning to ride them shortly after walking and climbing, and those who show an affinity for caring for them would find their own to raise. The griffin became a symbol of resolve and fortitude for the wild dwarves, and became so sacred a beast to the point where the sale of the eggs became a crime, a law that has also spread to most human cities. This reverence and bond with the griffins would in time physically, psychologically and culturally change the Wildhammer dwarves. Their time enduring high wind and sun would darken and weather their skin. They became taller, leaner and wilder. Their old heavy armour was a burden when riding their griffins, and wasn't really suited to their new home. Life among the clouds and trees demanded something different. They would move away from the typical dwarven heavy plate armour, and begin to craft and don griffin mail, a strange garment that looks more like clothing than armour. It's a long-sleeved cowl jacket, covered in feathers. Anyone familiar with griffins will recognise their plumage. Most suits of griffin mail are arranged so carefully the feathers form the same natural patterns found on the griffins themselves. They would become cherished by the elite riders, with some even having griffin mail created from their own mount's feathers, tying them together even more closely. Despite rumours and accusations, griffin mail is made only from feathers that have molted naturally or that a griffin has freely given. Others began to favour leaf mail, a light piece of armour that helps the wearer blend easily into their surroundings. At a glance, it looks almost like a random assortment of grass and leaves held together by twigs and sap. A second glance, however, shows this to be a cleverly constructed jacket or shirt, complete with hood, that can be easily repaired by affixing more leaves and grass. There is a good chance you have never heard of either of these, but there are actually in-game items with the name griffin mail, showing that it's not simply a forgotten footnote of the Wildhammers, but a recognised part of their culture. The cultural shift would not end with armour either. Their new lifestyle would change the way the Wildhammer dwarves viewed the world. While many think it was the Wildhammer's shamanistic ways that led to this bond with the griffins, it appears to actually be the opposite. It was their communion with their newfound home and their griffin companions that would lead them to embrace a shamanistic path, developing a particular reverence for storm and sky. In fact, the Wildhammer now believe that the griffins have an elemental ancestry and are elemental spirits in mortal form. Shamanism would become the chief faith amongst the clan, tying these wild dwarves closer to the world around them and the skies they so adored. However, the path of highest honour for all dwarves of the Eyrie remains that of the fierce and free Griffin Riders. And so, it's only natural that the averies would become the most important structures, both for the Wildhammers and all who would one day come to rely on the airborne warriors in future wars. The Aviary of Eyrie Peak was no simple stable. It was a sanctuary open to wind and sky. Carved in homage to the legendary beasts housed within, a colossal aspect of the griffin would be crafted into Eyrie Peak to loom over all that it surveyed. It would become a model for aviaries that would be built during the First and Second and Third Wars, when the Wildhammers would assist the alliance against the Horde, inspiring dread in the hearts of whomsoever the Griffin Riders called foe. Most sacred to the dwarves was the enchanted forge that lied at the heart of each aviary. It was here that the magical weapons known as stormhammers were fashioned. A stormhammer, when thrown, strikes with the fury of lightning and the force of thunder. This destructive weapon, combined with the indomitable spirit of the Griffin Riders, justified their position as masters of the skies. There is a part in the now semi-canon RPG book that claims stormhammers must be rededicated to their owners each year, and that a ceremony is held every solstice in the great halls of the Griffin Aviaries. The details of the ceremony are secret, but they are said to involve chanting, solemn oaths, and terrible hangovers the next day. There is, however, a girl that appears in one of the Warcraft legend comics that was adopted by the Wildhammer clan as an infant, and is said to be the first human to be honoured with a stormhammer. And though I can't find any sources that confirm or deny it elsewhere, a passing line in the comic tells us that the Wildhammers were using stormhammers in the days of the War of the Three Hammers, meaning that the Wildhammers knew how to forge the storm magic into their hammers before they actually embraced shamanism. But regardless of their origins, the combination of these mystical lightning-powered weapons and the astounding agility of the griffins would lead the Wildhammer Griffin Riders to be feared warriors of the sky. In the RPG, it's said that the most elite of these riders would become what is known as a Wind Warrior. To quote the book, "A Wind Warrior is more than a mounted warrior. He is a child of the air, a brother to the griffin, an enigma to the landbound. He has become one with his steed, and together they soar even higher, exulting in the freedom of flight. Wind warriors fight because it's required, but they fly because they must, because without such speed and altitude they would surely perish." Which is not to say that wind warriors are not formidable foes. Anyone who has ever faced one can attest to their martial prowess. Yet fighting is only one aspect of being a wind warrior. Speed, agility, freedom, and the bond with their mounts are the core of the class, the heart of their brotherhood. Anyone who lives to fly is a brother, and anyone who does not appreciate flight will never understand. Many can actually become wind warriors, as ability is more important than race. Blood elves, night elves, trolls and orcs are just a few races that train their own wind riders. But only for the wild dwarves is it so intertwined with their culture, making them the majority of the class. For them, the wind warriors are part of the community, and far and away the most exciting and adventurous members of the tribe. Wind Warriors will often form orders and organisations within their own societies, though it will often be more a loose fraternity than a rigid military unit or hierarchy. They will act as scouts, messengers, hunters and guardians, often taking contracts with various groups, individuals or even governments. They're not above taking mercenary contracts either. It's possible that the Wildhammer dwarves that bombed the Tauren camp of Tarajo in the Southern Barrens on behalf of the Dwarven hold of Baal Madan was one such band. The Alliance leaders also value Wind Warriors and have relied upon them for reconnaissance, communication, retrieval, rescue and attack. Though few in number, the Wind Warriors' speed and manoeuvrability makes them immensely valuable in any combat, particularly when facing land-bound foes. Despite their fearsome reputation, most Wind Warriors are not boastful figures. They understand a simple truth. It is not the dwarf alone who commands the sky. Without the griffin, there is no rider. In many ways, it is the mount who is paramount. This humility tempers them, for every Wind Warrior tends personally to their griffin, feeding, grooming, mending their harness, and sharing long hours upon the cliffs. Pride has little room to grow when one's life depends upon the trust of another living soul. Nor are the Wind Warriors driven by wealth or glory. Such things matter little to those who have tasted true freedom. What they crave instead is the open sky, the ability to fly where they will, when they will, carried by wind and instinct. To ride a griffin demands more than courage. It demands adaptability. The skies shift without warning, winds turn, currents twist, storms gather in the moment. A Wind Warrior must feel these changes as keenly as their mount does. They learn to move as one with their griffin, to anticipate rather than command, to guide rather than to dominate. Through patience and shared hardship, trust deepens into loyalty, and loyalty into something closer to love. Life in the saddle is not gentle. Wind Warriors endure biting cold, punishing gusts, and exhaustion of long journeys. Their strength is not merely for battle, but for endurance, for steady hands upon the reins, and the carrying of provisions across vast distances. The old Warcraft RPG went even further, imagining the Wind Warriors not as skilled riders, but as warriors whose bond with their griffins border on the supernatural. At the heart of their order was something deeply symbolic, a carved totem. Each Wind Warrior would shape their own from stone or wood, pouring days of labour and intention into its creation. This was no mere charm, it was a spiritual anchor, deepening the connection between the rider and mount. Upon completion, the Wind Warrior cuts themselves and their mount, dips the totem in a mixture of the blood, and through this ritual, the bond between dwarf and griffin could be strengthened and the totem used to perform feats across vast distances. As their skill deepened further, so too did their bond. Veteran Wind Warriors could communicate more clearly with their griffins, and even others of its species, almost as though thought passed between them. They could use their totem to telepathically call their mount to them, and eventually send short messages, allowing for surprise attacks from above. Among the most fascinating abilities imagined in the old RPG was something called totem transport. At the height of their mastery, a Wind Warrior could merge their griffin with their carved totem by touching the icon to their companion and pulling it into the totem. The griffin can remain inside the totem for hours at a time, not needing to eat, drink, sleep or even breathe before being summoned out once again to assist its rider. For players of World of Warcraft, this idea feels strangely familiar. We summon our mounts with little more than a thought, dismiss them just as easily, and never question the how of it. The RPG offers this poetic answer. The Wildhammers had found happiness in their new home and culture, and would limit ties to the outside world, enjoying the contentment that living in the skies brought for over 2 centuries, before being pulled violently from their reverie. When the Second War erupted, the Orcish horde enslaved the Red Dragonflight, chaining their queen and forcing the Dragonflight to bear the horde to war. The skies themselves seemed lost to the Alliance. Fleets burned and villages were devastated. For a time, the Alliance had no counter. But from Eerie Peak came the answer, the Wildhammer Gryphon Riders. It would be the second war that would truly test the new strength of these wild dwarves, and they would not be found wanting. Though not formal members of the Alliance, the Wildhammers would answer the call to battle, bringing Beard, Stormhammer and Talon in defence. The wrath of the wild dwarves of the Eyrie would forever be etched in the minds of both Horde and Alliance alike. Thank you for watching this episode of Dwarfhearth. I have held off doing anything on the Wildhammer dwarves for ages as I really wanted to do them justice, but I've had a few comments and even emails now asking for them, so I hope this first episode on them scratched that Wildhammer itch even a little. If you want more dwarf-centric content, please do consider leaving a comment and a like, as it lets me know that these videos are reaching the right people. Thank you so much again, and I hope to see you next time at the Hearth. Cheers.